My friends, there comes a time in life when the storms rage, the winds howl, and the waves crash against the very foundation of our faith. It is in these moments that the enemy whispers, "You are alone. You have been forsaken." But I stand before you today to declare a truth that cannot be shaken. God is standing by you. He has never left you, and He never will. Trials are not signs of abandonment. They are proof that you are on the path to something greater. Gold is refined in fire, and diamonds are formed under pressure. Do not misinterpret the fire as punishment. See it as preparation. What you are going through is not the end. It is the beginning of a transformation. Every great man and woman of purpose faced adversity, and yet they endured. Not because they were strong, but because they understood who was standing with them. When Joseph was thrown into the pit, falsely accused and imprisoned, he could have given up. But he knew that the God who gave him the dream had not abandoned him. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, it looked like the end. But the one who created the lion stood beside him. And when 3 Hebrew boys were thrown into the fiery furnace, the fire did not consume them because there was another standing in the fire with them. There are moments in life when difficulties arise and it feels as if everything is working against you. The weight of challenges can press down so heavily that you begin to wonder if you've been forgotten, if your struggles are a sign that you've been left behind. But trials are not an indication of abandonment. They are a necessary part of preparation for something greater. The process of refinement is never easy, but it is always necessary. Just as gold is tested in fire to remove impurities, so too must you go through seasons of difficulty to become who you were created to be. Every person with a great destiny has had to endure moments of hardship. There is no shortcut to greatness. Look at the lives of those who changed history and you will find a common pattern: trials, struggles, and opposition. But these obstacles were not designed to destroy them. They were meant to shape them, mold them, and strengthen them for the assignment ahead. If you resist the process, you risk forfeiting the promise. There are no victories without battles, no testimonies without tests, and no promotions without preparation. Consider the life of Joseph. He received a dream of greatness, a vision of ruling and leading, but before he could step into that destiny, he had to endure betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. His trials were not a sign that he had been abandoned. In fact, they were proof that he was on the right path. Every hardship he faced positioned him closer to his purpose. Had he not been sold into slavery, he would never have arrived in Egypt. Had he not been falsely accused and thrown into prison, he would not have met the key people who would lead him to the palace. What looked like setbacks were actually divine setups for his promotion. The same principle applies to you. What you are going through right now is not the end of your story. It is a chapter in your preparation. Too often, people misinterpret their struggles as signs of failure, when in reality, they are stepping stones to the next level. The pressure you feel is not meant to crush you. It is meant to produce resilience, wisdom, and strength. If everything came easily, you would not be prepared for what is coming next. Diamonds are formed under intense pressure. Without pressure, carbon remains in its raw form, never reaching its full potential. It is only through heat and compression that it transforms into something rare and valuable. Likewise, your struggles are refining you, bringing out the greatness within you. Do not despise the process, because what is being developed in you is greater than the pain of the moment. Look at the lives of those who have succeeded in any area of life. You will find that they did not reach their destiny without enduring hardships. Athletes train relentlessly, pushing their bodies to the limit. Musicians practice for years before they ever perform on a grand stage. Leaders are tested through seasons of difficulty before they can carry the weight of responsibility. The trials are never in vain. They serve a greater purpose, one that may not be visible at the moment but will become clear in time. What you are facing today is part of a divine process. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. There is greatness within you, and it takes seasons of refinement to bring it to the surface. The trials are not a sign of defeat. They are a sign that you are being positioned for something greater. Life has a way of making you question what you believe. When the storms of life rage and nothing seems to be working in your favor, the first thought that often comes to mind is, where is God? It is easy to believe that He is with you when everything is going well, when doors are opening and when blessings are overflowing. But when challenges arise, when prayers seem unanswered, and when trials seem unending, doubt begins to creep in. The greatest test of faith is not believing in God's existence, but trusting in His presence when everything around you suggests otherwise. God's presence is constant, whether you feel it or not. Feelings are unreliable because they are tied to circumstances. If you base your faith on how you feel, then your faith will waver with every trial. But the truth is that God does not move based on emotions. He moves according to His promises. He has declared that He will never leave you nor forsake you. That means His presence is not something you have to earn or beg for. It is a guarantee. Even in the silence, even in the struggles, even in the moments when you feel forgotten, He is there. One of the greatest tricks of the enemy is to convince you that you are alone. Isolation breeds fear, and fear leads to despair. When you feel alone in your struggle, you begin to believe that there is no help, no support, and no way out. But the truth is that God is always near. He is not watching from a distance. He is standing beside you in the fire, walking with you through the valley and holding you up when you feel like falling. The absence of immediate relief does not mean the absence of His presence. Sometimes God allows the storm to continue, not because He has left you, but because He is teaching you how to trust Him in the middle of it. Consider the story of the disciples caught in the storm. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and fear gripped their hearts. Yet in the midst of the chaos, Jesus was with them in the boat. He had not left them. He was present in the storm. And when the time was right, He spoke a word and calmed the seas. The storm did not mean He had abandoned them. It was an opportunity for them to see His power in a way they had never experienced before. Sometimes God does not remove the storm immediately because He wants you to learn to trust Him in it. Another powerful example is when Jesus walked on water towards His disciples. At first, they did not recognize Him because their focus was on the storm. Fear blinded them from seeing that the very one they needed was already present. This is what happens when you allow difficulties to consume your mind. You become so fixated on the problem that you fail to see the solution standing right before you. God is with you even when you do not recognize Him. He is working in ways you cannot see, orchestrating things behind the scenes for your good. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fiery furnace, the king expected them to be consumed, but when he looked inside, he saw a fourth figure standing with them. They were not alone. The fire did not consume them because God was in the fire with them. In the same way, you may feel like the heat of life's challenges is too much to bear, but you are not standing in the fire alone. God is right there, shielding you, sustaining you, and ensuring that what was meant to destroy you will only refine you. Your circumstances do not determine God's presence. His promise does. Even when you cannot feel Him, even when you do not see any signs, He is there. Every situation you face in life is temporary. The pain, the struggles, the disappointments, and the challenges may seem overwhelming in the moment, but they will not last forever. Too often, people become so consumed by their current difficulties that they lose sight of the bigger picture. They mistake a season of hardship for a lifetime of suffering. But no matter how dark the night may seem, the sun will rise again. The circumstances you are going through right now are not permanent. They are only a phase in your journey. Purpose, on the other hand, is eternal. It is not dictated by circumstances, nor is it erased by trials. What you were created for does not change simply because you are experiencing difficulty. In fact, many of the greatest purposes are birthed in the midst of adversity. Every challenge you face is not meant to break you, but to build you into the person who can carry out the destiny that has been placed within you. Too often, people allow temporary struggles to make them question their purpose. They assume that because things are not going smoothly, they must have taken the wrong path. But in reality, the presence of obstacles is often confirmation that you are on the right path. Look at the story of David. He was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd boy. But before he could step into that destiny, he had to go through years of trials. He faced rejection, persecution, and even exile. There were moments when it seemed like the promise over his life would never come to pass. But the difficulties did not cancel his purpose, they prepared him for it. Had he not faced the lion and the bear, he would not have been ready for Goliath. Had he not endured the jealousy and pursuit of King Saul, he would not have developed the wisdom and character necessary to rule a nation. Every trial was shaping him for the position he was destined to hold. The same is true for you. Whatever you are facing today is not the end of your story. It is merely a chapter in the book of your life. If you give up in the middle of your trial, you may never see the fulfillment of what you were created for. Too many people quit before they reach their breakthrough because they allow temporary pain to overshadow an eternal purpose. But just because you do not see the results yet does not mean the process is not working. Think of a seed planted in the ground. For a long time, there is no visible evidence of growth. It is buried beneath the soil, going through a process that no one can see. But beneath the surface, transformation is taking place. Roots are growing deep, preparing to support the tree that will one day rise above the ground. If someone were to dig up the seed too soon, they would never see the fruit it was meant to produce. Your purpose is the same. Just because you do not see immediate results does not mean progress is not being made. Adversity is a training ground. It is in difficult times that character is developed, resilience is built, and faith is strengthened. If everything came easily, you would never grow into the person you were meant to be. Gold is refined in fire, and strong warriors are trained in battle. The trials you are facing today are equipping you for the next level of your destiny. The key is to endure, to keep pressing forward even when it feels like nothing is changing. Purpose is not something that can be taken away by hardship. It is placed within you by the one who created you, and nothing can erase it. The storm you are facing now will pass, but the purpose inside you will remain. Throughout history, every person who fulfilled a great purpose had to walk through trials that tested their faith, endurance, and character. These trials were not signs that they were on the wrong path. They were proof that they were being prepared for something greater. The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who faced difficulties, yet in every trial, God stood with them. Their lives are reminders that no matter how difficult the journey may seem, you are never alone in the struggle. Joseph was given a dream of greatness at a young age. He saw visions of himself ruling and leading, yet instead of immediately stepping into that destiny, he was thrown into a pit by his own brothers. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. Everything in his life seemed to move in the opposite direction of the promise he had received. But even in the prison, God was with him. In the lowest moments of his life, God was working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances in his favor. The betrayal, the false accusations, and the years of suffering were not signs of abandonment, but stepping stones to his destiny. What others meant for evil, God used for good. Daniel was a man of integrity, wisdom, and unwavering faith. Yet despite his commitment to righteousness, he found himself in a lion's den, sentenced to death for his devotion to God. From a human perspective, it seemed unfair. He had done nothing wrong, yet he faced a situation that could have cost him his life. But in that moment, God stood with him. The mouths of the lions were shut, and what was meant to destroy him became a testimony of divine protection. His trial was not a sign that God had abandoned him. It was an opportunity for God's power to be revealed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to an idol. Even when it meant facing a fiery furnace, their faith was not dependent on whether God would save them. They declared that even if he did not deliver them, they would not compromise their faith. They were thrown into the flames, yet they were not consumed. When the king looked into the furnace, he saw not 3 men, but 4. God himself was in the fire with them. The flames that were meant to destroy them became the very place where God's presence was revealed. The fire did not harm them, but it refined their testimony, proving that God stands with those who trust him. The disciples found themselves in a storm while crossing the sea. The waves were crashing against their boat, and fear gripped their hearts. In the midst of their panic, Jesus appeared, walking on the water. At first, they did not recognize him because their focus was on the storm. But even in the chaos, he was present. When Peter stepped out in faith to walk on the water, he began to sink the moment he shifted his focus from Jesus to the waves. Yet, Jesus immediately reached out his hand. The storm did not mean that Jesus had abandoned them. He was there all along, teaching them to trust him in the midst of the storm. These stories are not just historical accounts. They are principles that apply to every person facing trials today. God does not promise a life free of challenges, but he does promise his presence. The same God who stood with Joseph in prison, who shut the mouths of lions for Daniel, who walked through the fire with the 3 Hebrew boys, and who calmed the storm for the disciples, is the same God who stands with you now. If he did it for them, he will do it for you. The trials you face are not proof of God's absence, but an opportunity for his presence to be revealed in a greater way. Faith is not meant to be built on emotions, circumstances, or human understanding. It is meant to be anchored in the unchanging promises of God. One of the biggest mistakes people make in difficult times is allowing what they see to dictate what they believe. When things are going well, faith seems easy. But when storms arise, when prayers seem unanswered, when obstacles seem unmovable, that is when true faith is tested. Faith that is rooted in circumstances will always waver, but faith that is rooted in God's promises will stand firm no matter what comes. God has never failed to keep his word. From the beginning of time, every promise he has spoken has either come to pass or is in the process of fulfillment. His word is more reliable than feelings, more stable than emotions, and more powerful than circumstances. Yet when trials come, many people allow fear and doubt to take over. They begin to question whether God is really with them, whether he really cares, or whether he will truly come through. But faith is not about seeing immediate results. It is about trusting in what has already been spoken. When Abraham was given the promise that he would become the father of many nations, he had every reason to doubt. He was old, his wife Sarah was beyond childbearing years, and from a natural perspective, it seemed impossible. But Abraham did not base his faith on what he saw. The Bible says that he believed in the God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not as though they were. He trusted in God's promise, even when circumstances suggested otherwise. That is the kind of faith that produces results. Not a faith that wavers with emotions, but a faith that remains firm regardless of the situation. The Israelites were given a promise that they would enter the promised land. But when they stood at the border and saw giants in the land, many of them allowed fear to override their faith. They focused on the obstacles rather than the promise. As a result, an entire generation missed out on what God had already prepared for them. Their problem was not that God's promise had changed. Their problem was that they allowed what they saw to dictate what they believed. Those who held on to the promise, like Joshua and Caleb, were the ones who eventually inherited the land. Jesus constantly challenged his disciples to have faith in what he had spoken rather than what they saw. When he told Peter to walk on water, Peter stepped out in faith and began walking. But the moment he shifted his focus from Jesus to the wind and waves, he began to sink. The storm did not change. The only thing that changed was where Peter placed his focus. When faith is rooted in the promise, It remains strong. But when it is based on circumstances, it will always falter. The enemy's greatest weapon is deception. He tries to use circumstances to convince people that God has abandoned them, that his promises are no longer valid, and that they will never see victory. But the truth is that circumstances do not have the power to change God's word. If he has spoken it, it will come to pass. The key is to stand firm, to refuse to be moved by what is seen, and to trust that his promises are more real than any temporary trial. Every person will face moments when their faith is tested. It is in those moments that the decision must be made. Will faith be placed in what is seen, or will it be placed in what has been promised? Those who hold on to God's word, regardless of circumstances, will see his faithfulness revealed in ways they never imagined. Life has a way of making people feel isolated in their struggles. Difficulties arise, challenges seem unending, and in those moments it is easy to believe that no one understands or cares. The weight of trials can create the illusion that God has stepped away, that he is watching from a distance, uninvolved in the pain and struggles of life. But nothing could be further from the truth. The promise of God is clear. He will never leave nor forsake his people. His presence is not conditional on circumstances. It is a constant, unchanging reality. Even in the moments when he seems silent, he is still standing by. There is a reason the enemy works so hard to convince people that they are alone. A person who believes they are abandoned is more likely to give up. Isolation breeds despair, and despair leads to hopelessness. But the truth is that no one is ever truly alone. God has always been with his people, even when they did not recognize his presence. The fact that he is not always visible does not mean he is absent. He is always working, always moving, and always positioning things for his greater purpose. One of the greatest examples of this is in the story of Job. He was a righteous man, faithful and devoted, yet he faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family, and he had no understanding of why. His friends accused him. His wife told him to curse God and die, and everything seemed to be against him. But what Job could not see was that God was still in control. Even when Job questioned, even when he felt abandoned, God was standing by. The season of suffering did not last forever, and in the end, Job was restored beyond what he had lost. His story is a reminder that silence does not mean absence, and suffering does not mean abandonment. David, a man after God's own heart, had moments when he cried out, asking God why he seemed so far away. In the Psalms, he often expressed feelings of loneliness and despair. But even in his lowest moments, he always came back to one truth. God was with him when he faced Goliath, when he was pursued by Saul, and when he went through personal failures. God never left his side. No matter how far David fell, no matter how dark the situation, God remained faithful. Even Jesus, in his moment of greatest suffering on the cross, cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In that moment, he experienced the weight of humanity's sin, yet even then, the presence of the Father had not truly left him. It was only an experience of temporary separation, necessary for the fulfillment of redemption. But after the suffering came the resurrection. What seemed like abandonment was actually part of a greater purpose. In every trial, in every hardship, in every dark season, God is standing by. His presence does not waver based on emotions or circumstances. He is not a distant observer. He is an ever-present help in times of trouble. The fire may burn, but he is in the fire. The storm may rage, but he is in the storm. The battle may be fierce, but he stands beside those who trust in him. His presence is not based on human perception, but on divine promise. Every moment of pain, every season of waiting, and every challenge faced is not faced alone. Even when nothing makes sense, even when prayers seem unanswered, God is present. He is standing by, watching over, guiding, strengthening, and preparing a way forward. The trials of life may be unpredictable, but his presence is constant. In every trial, struggle, and hardship, we are reminded that God's presence is unwavering. Even when we cannot feel Him or see His work in our circumstances, He is always standing by us, guiding us through the storms and refining us for the purpose He has destined for our lives. The promises He has made to us are not shaken by the temporary challenges we face. Our faith, rooted in His eternal word, becomes our anchor in the midst of chaos. We are never alone, no matter how isolated or overwhelmed we may feel. The tests and difficulties are not signs of abandonment. They are opportunities for us to experience His strength, His faithfulness, and His love in deeper, more profound ways. God's presence is not dependent on our emotions or situations, but is a constant, faithful reality that sustains us through every moment. His promise to never leave nor forsake us stands firm, and no matter what we face, He is always standing by, ready to carry us through to victory.